I got some really good advice from a mentor, and he said, Kelly, what's funny is the less I give people, the more they're willing to pay for it. And I thought it was really interesting because that is the essence of a luxury brand or a high-end brand is if I give you $99 unlimited access to the studio, it's going to feel less exclusive.
Welcome to Made Locally, the podcast for people building real businesses in the real world. I'm Rajul Jaswa, and on this show, I interview the entrepreneurs that have built thriving local businesses to uncover how they attracted customers, built strong brands, and grew rapidly and sustainably. You'll hear from operators, founders, and experts sharing what's actually working across marketing, operations, and technology. No fluff, just practical insights you can use today. Kelly, so I am genuinely pumped for this. You are someone I've been lucky enough to make friends with over the last couple of months. And, when I talk to other local business owners, I often have you in my mind as like what I really want them to be doing, the way that you operate. A little bit of context for people who are listening to this. Kelly and I got introduced through a mutual friend, and Kelly is someone who I think similar to me, started in more of like a tech background and sales and more traditional white collar business. And I think similar to me, he really had a passion for health and wellness. And it was something that he thought about a lot in his personal life. And he took that passion and bottled it up and turned it into a new career. And I've had the great fortune of getting to work with him and learn from him and teach him a couple of things maybe along the way. And it's just been awesome to see how he has built something really, really meaningful. I mean, I'd say in our day-to-day conversations, he often is like, when am I going to turn the corner? But from my perspective, he actually is like way past the corner, and the corner is like way in the rearview mirror. And so I think for a lot of the people who are listening to this, it's going to be awesome to hear about Kelly, hear about why he's doing what he's doing, how he pulled it off, and what the future has to hold for Palm Coast, Zivel. So, Kelly, welcome to the Made Locally podcast, and I am genuinely stoked to have you here.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I think appreciate all the kind words there. I think one of the fondest memories that I have of our interactions is when I told you kind of what the business was doing, how we were doing it, and you kind of got this look and you said, man, you're doing that much revenue with these broken, antiquated manual processes. There must really be something there.
No punches held. No, it's a genuine compliment. Yeah, it's cool. I'd say that, you kind of have this unique combination of really being passionate about your craft, which I think a lot of local business owners, they're very passionate about their craft, but you also kind of have this really sort of like athletic, like business kind of mindset where you're thinking, hey, how do I, take this and turn it into a playbook? How do I, get my team to work harder the way I would push my teammates? How do I, think about the long-term potential of this business, not just the one problem that's right in front of my face? So you really, I think, have this dual mindset of like passionate about what you're bringing to your local community. And then also you have this real like drive and fire to build an absolutely awesome business. So yeah. It's really cool to see.
Well, I think, we're talking about, how this all started. And, the brief background for me is I was a collegiate gymnast and then got into yoga a little bit, got into some recovery from my gymnastics injuries, had a number of friends that pursued different types of athletic endeavors, whether it was, partnering with CrossFit or things like that. And one of them said to me, if you could ever find an arena to sort of be in the health and fitness space and make money and make enough money to pay your bills, I think you'd be great at it because you're really passionate about it. You have a way of describing it and connecting with people that brings them in and makes them sort of curious and they feel like they're being led by somebody that knows what they're talking about. And so, the business sort of started out of that little seed that was planted. And I was in tech sales effectively for 15 plus years, and it was kind of miserable. It's kind of this, there was a loss of relationships in sales, right? Because it became all this consensus buying and you're dealing with big organizations. And no longer was it these deep, meaningful relationships with particular buyers and particular representatives of companies. And to me, it became pretty impersonal. And I wanted to connect with people. I wanted to connect with my neighbors, my people in my community. And I said, how can I start to know everybody's name? How can I start to bring some sort of value where people are coming to see me or I'm getting to see them? And this idea of doing something that was a local business kind of came up. And I was actually approached by a franchise coach, believe it or not, who caught me at a time when I was particularly down on the W-2 job. And he presented different franchises to me. And we started with a really in-depth interview of what am I good at? What do I want? What do I not want? Do I want a brick and mortar store? Do I want it to have, an online presence? How many employees do I want? Do I not want employees? All these things that sort of narrowed down the funnel of what might make sense. We talked with several franchises, and this one sort of, this Zivel Performance and Recovery really stood out because it had all the elements that I was kind of into. And, we got the SBA loan and kind of kicked it off. And it was a newer franchise. So we had a little bit of latitude on how we did things, what our branding and design looked like, how we went to market, our pricing. And that was really important for me because I wanted to have some ownership over the business. And, from there, we just started figuring stuff out.
So cool. And when did you start the process of trying to figure out what type of franchise to partner with?
Yeah, so I would say probably about 2 years ago, and we've been up and running for about 14 months. So it was a bit of a trek. I think one of the hardest things for me was when I've got a couple of young kids. I didn't want to trade in a very predictable 40-hour work week for longer hours and less money. I didn't want to be a slave to the business, trying to turn this into something huge while my family, was on the outskirts. And at the same time, I didn't want to just go broke. And I had a good thing going, right? So that was a little tough. And I tried to talk with different business owners and franchisees about what is it really going to be like for that first year, first 18 months? How do you do it? And I think I got some really good advice from somebody, and he said, you can make it whatever you want it to be, but just keep in mind that you don't have to get to your revenue goals at a certain time. He's like, you'll get there. You could do it in 2 months, you could do it in 2 years, but that's your choice. And so that kind of put me at ease because I've always been relatively good at regulating how much, for lack of a better term, how much effort I put forth. So I wasn't going to kill myself. I wasn't going to be pulling 90-hour weeks, and we'll get there when we get there was kind of my strategy. Now, we were going to do it in a very professional and a very thoughtful way, but it just wasn't going to look like me staying all hours at the studio, getting everything going. So that's kind of how we kicked it off.
Awesome. And when you were meeting with different franchise platforms, what were the main questions that you wanted to get answered?
Yeah, I think originally I kind of started out and wanted to get as much certainty as I could around what are they going to do for me? How are they going to help me? What are the typical performers doing? And then where would I kind of fit in? And, you like to think of yourself as smart or as ambitious as the others, in that middle percentile, at least, if not above that. And I was really trying to nail down, okay, how quickly can I get profitable? How quickly can I get my investment back? What is the 5-10 year horizon going to look like? Do I want to have multiple units? And if so, when does that happen? How do I get the loans for that? So those were the kinds of questions that I wanted to start out answering. And then, quickly got into the more personal side of it, which is, how do you do it? How hard is this? Who are you talking to? How did you go from not knowing anything about roofing to running a roofing franchise, right? And what does the franchise do for you? What are the things that, were the hardest, the most surprising? And you could ask those questions about any business. I think I was drawn to the franchise model because I don't like the statistics of new businesses and how how high the failure rate is. And when you look at the franchise failure rate, it's a lot lower after 1 year and after 5 years. So I was like, okay, I've got a little bit of support here. Somebody's already done it. I just have to be really good at following the model. And I thought that I was. And then you kind of break the model and you find things that work even better.
Awesome. And when you think about bringing a service to a new market like you did you have a lot of concerns about, hey, will this service actually match the demographics of this market? Is this something people are going to be interested in? Or did you do a lot of research on that up front? What was, or was it more intuition based? How did you kind of think about, is this the right type of business to be starting?
Well, I'm an optimist at heart. So I was just like, this is just going to work. It'll work fine. Don't worry about it. I didn't do a lot of demographic research. I think I had one company that sort of said, hey, most people are, 40 to 60, and here's the median income. And I didn't even really know how to interpret that. So I was probably a little ignorant as to what kind of research I should have done to understand, is this appropriate for my area? And then I think I was also a little bit, let's say, just uninformed as to what kinds of people would utilize the services that we were going to offer. And for performance and recovery, you might immediately jump to, hey, this can be great for a lot of athletes. Well, we opened up in a shopping center with a Planet Fitness, and we have like 2 members that are actually members of Planet Fitness. And it just, we didn't actually, we didn't say, this is our market, go get them. We said, we're going to offer great services, really good customer service. We're going to have a beautiful look and feel. Everybody that walks in the door, we're going to stand out. And then we're going to see what market kind of comes to us with our advertising and with our general word of mouth. And it wasn't the Planet Fitness audience. It was, in the demographic of, the majority, and those are going to be the 45 to 65-year-olds, but they're retired. They are on a fixed income. They are upper middle class. They have time from 10 to 5 in the, weekdays to come in and use our stuff. And the Planet Fitness folks, they're kind of all over the board, right? They could be 18-year-old, high school kids. They could be 70-year-olds that just go to the gym to kind of feel like they're doing something. And they're not fitting into the ideal customer profile or not, right? So it was kind of a crapshoot with Planet Fitness. Plus there's, 1,000 members over there, and it didn't align. So I think, one of the lessons learned was, when you open your business, don't think that you have it all figured out of who needs this, right? You probably have no idea. You should have some idea. Maybe you ask around, but don't try to force your market. Kind of figure out who's going to naturally need this stuff and how to appeal to them.
Cool. Okay. So walk us through the beginning. So you said, okay, I'm going to start this business about 14 months ago. And how long did it take to get the space built out? Maybe that's the first question we can start with, and kind of get all the pieces in place.
Yeah, so I had some back and forth with the franchisor, trying to understand what kind of space we're looking for. And they were pretty helpful in the square footage that you need, the build out, what it looks like, what kind of places to target. And I started, shopping around, looking at commercial real estate listings. I had a realtor help me, and she was just sending me things to look at. So I started to get a feel for, what was out there, what the prices were. And then I think the build out part of it was pretty interesting, because we ended up finding a place that was pretty much built out the way that we needed it. So extremely lucky to have, the hallway with 3 rooms on either side. And I don't think we'll ever find that again necessarily if we, open more units. But there was still a lot I didn't know about building out a commercial space, and everything from the electrical requirements of all these high energy requiring machines to, simple stuff like retexturing the walls and, putting in a water line for the water cooler. I don't know who to call, how to do this stuff. And then there was the part of, okay, I'm going to order $200,000 worth of really, really high tech equipment that's just going to show up on pallets. Like what am I supposed to do with that shit? So that was a little bit of a maze to get through. And yes, the franchisor and some of the other franchisees kind of give you some tips and tricks. But, at the end of the day, what it looks like in practice is I have a dry flotation tank that arrives on the back of a big truck. The delivery guy and his wife are supposed to unload it and white glove it into the studio for me. The thing weighs 800 pounds. So they don't even know what to do. They don't have rollers. We got to go over to Planet Fitness and find, three 21-year-old kids that are, looking to make a couple bucks and pay them to help us lift an 800-pound coffin through the door, flipping it on its side, moving stuff around, leaking, condensing fluid. I don't even know what's in there, and put this thing in place. And, I'm a former gymnast with back injuries. I'm not going to lift it. So I'm just directing traffic out there. And then, you look at the plugs and it's just some pigtails and you're like, where's the plug? So then you got to go to Home Depot and, buy the connector, and you got to call an electrician and he crimps everything. And you're like, is this safe? Like, did you put in, I don't even know the voltage, but it's basically what you do with your washer dryer. So, there's those things of the build out. For us, it wasn't about putting walls up and getting the coolest lighting. Switching out some some, what do you call them? Like the little square lights for can lights. That's pretty easy. Just get a good electrician. The painting stuff ended up being pretty easy. But it was more of the just turning the space into a studio and not a bunch of rooms. And luckily, my wife's got a good eye for that stuff. So she kind of told me what to do, where to hang stuff, and I meticulously hung it. And it looks really nice. So that was actually kind of fun, building all that stuff and understanding it a little bit.
Amazing. And then once you had all that stuff done and you were ready to open the doors, start trying to get customers, what was your plan? Was it just kind of like open it and see what happens? Or did you have some big grand opening, or how did you approach that?
I approached it by basically shitting my pants and being like, I don't know what I'm doing. Um, so luckily my wife's a little bit more optimistic and she had some ideas. She promoted it on Facebook and talked with a bunch of friends in the area. She's local. And so she got the buzz going, and she's got a great social media following. But it really looked like a soft opening where we had our staff hired, trained, and they were practicing on customer interactions, how to run the credit card swiper, how to set people up on different things. We didn't even have people sign waivers. Like, it was a little bit iffy. And people were asking us, do we need to sign anything? And I was like, probably. I don't have it. So, you're like, here we go. And we offered, some cool specials for initial founding members, and we got some momentum. We got 20, 25, 30 members. What I would have done if I'd had more guidance from somebody that knew what they were doing is something where you start to pre-sale, or you do a pre-sale campaign where you might post something that says, hey, 25 founding membership slots available. And then there's 50 of this next level and 50 of this final level. And then you just kind of show them going away. And I think that's what some other folks had done that was pretty effective. What I would not do is say, hey, if you sign up the first month, it's dirt cheap, because that can get you in a hole, particularly on something like a service business where you have a limited capacity. And other people did that, where they were offering these super cheap $99 unlimited memberships. Now you got 50 people using this stuff all day long, and you don't have capacity and you're not making very much money. So we went the other direction. We said, all right, we're going to really cap the number of these unlimited ones. And then we're going to start jacking up the prices and seeing when people cry uncle on the price. And I got some really good advice from a mentor. And he said, Kelly, what's funny is the less I give people, the more they're willing to pay for it. And I thought it was really interesting, because that is the essence of a luxury brand or a high-end brand, is if I give you $99 unlimited access to the studio, it's going to feel less exclusive. It's going to feel kind of cheap compared to if I say, hey, it's $150 for 5 services. And so, learning about little pricing techniques and things like that. But to be honest, it was really good signage, and a place where the word of mouth started kind of drumming up a lot of business. So the people that were early adopters were dying for something like this. So going back to why we started the franchise, nothing like it existed in a 30-mile radius. And you could go to a sauna, at the Gold's Gym in another city, or you could go 45 minutes away to a place that happened to have cryotherapy, but nowhere in the general vicinity had those things, and nobody had them all, obviously. So that was kind of our niche, and we capitalized on that.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get to those 30 early adopter members? Was that like the first month or the first couple of months?
Yeah, I would say in the first month, we managed to get to around 20K in revenue. I'd say within the first 3 months. Like I was kind of surprised that that I could generate a business with that much revenue in a relatively short time. And my plan for transitioning from my W-2 to the business was I gotta at least be breaking even. And that was around the 30K mark. And when I did that, I said, okay, let's shift full focus into the business and see what I'm made of. And that's kind of how that worked out. So I'd say somewhere around the 6-month mark, maybe even the 5-month mark, was when I said, putting in the notice at the W-2, we had come off our best month at that point, which was like right around 40,000. And I said, I think we can keep growing, and I'm gonna put in my notice.
Wow. Cool. Okay. And, to go from those initial early adopters, the first 30 friends and family and, people who were really in the community and connected to you guys, to now you're starting to get people who you don't have any relationship with, who, don't know you or don't know your wife, or, you guys aren't in any like shared social networks or anything like that. How did you make that leap, to the point where you really had people who you never even knew about who are actually becoming your customers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question when we think about the transition. Coincidentally, like the marketing side kind of kept happening or I should say the membership side was happening a little bit more organically, but the big ticket revenue for what we call our body contouring or our facial packs, those required some marketing chops. And so we hired a company to start some social media campaigns, some meta ads to get the word out, just to be on people's feeds. And they had done it before. So it was a couple of guys that used to work with a very similar type of business, med spa, recovery kind of deal. And they had seen some of the pitfalls, and they kind of created a system that was effective. I kind of learned along the way that it wasn't completely optimal, but it was pretty effective. And it was just blasting people with the ads until it stuck. And I had several people come in and say, I keep seeing your ads, man. Like I was thinking about it and I was talking about it, and then bam, your ads. And I was like, that's Facebook, baby. So it was, you just keep hitting people until they give in, and then you wow them when they walk through the doors, and it becomes relatively easy. So, I was thinking about joining, B&I groups and things of that nature. And I said, when people walk through the door, we win. That's what I really need. I don't need every business owner to try to hand out my business cards for free service. And, so we took a little bit different tact of just how do we do some guerrilla marketing? How do we get some boots on the ground? Everybody that we know should be talking about it with everybody they know. We put, flyers on people's windshields at a new apartment complex. And then we got called and told we couldn't do that. I'm like, sorry, we won't do that anymore. But, 350 flyers later, people were coming in. And little things like that, just to keep the trickle coming steady. And then we started spending a little bit more on the Facebook and the meta ads, so that we could have a very predictable, 3 to 5 leads that were interested in our studio coming in a day, maybe. And when I say coming in, I mean coming into the marketing system. Maybe 1 or 2 of those would give us a call. Maybe one of those would come by, and we'd schedule them. And we kind of took off from there, and then found out what was working and where we could kind of get more people booked for appointments.
That's awesome. A lot of the small business owners that I talk to, when they first start running ads, they get really skittish really early. They run ads for 2 weeks and say, oh my God, I put $400 into this. I've only gotten 0 or 1 customers out of it. This isn't working. I got to pull the plug, and they just sort of prematurely terminate. What kind of a mindset did you have going into it? Like, were you thinking, hey, this is something that I'm going to try for a while and give it a real chance to succeed? Or did you also sort of like, would you have pulled the plug if it wasn't working right away? Like, what was the psychology that you went into it with?
Like a small child that didn't have any better ideas. The franchisor had connected us with a marketing company that was borderline fraudsters, and kind of charged this upfront fee to everybody, did nothing, and then refused to give any money back. So that was more like a $6,000 lesson. And then I did, like many business owners, become a little skittish with marketing companies in general. I was approached by the firm that we use now that, again, they had some experience in our niche, and they had a very convincing story of, I've seen it, I've lived it, none of these things work. We started our company to correct some of these failure points. And I said, you know what? This is the best chance that I have for a marketing team to sort of really try to help me. And then, I wasn't an asshole with them when things weren't working. I was like, hey guys, I want to learn. This is what I'm noticing. How do we tweak this? How do we get better? What does this mean? Are these working? And they started, kind of having meetings with me and tweaking things. And I think that relationship was important, to not just turn to somebody and be like, you guys suck, you're failing, you're fired, I want all my money back. That doesn't get me customers, right? It just makes me feel like I got my anger out. So, that was the approach that I kind of took on the marketing side is, can we get a path that works? Teach me how to do this. You guys are the experts. You've done it before. What was it like for you? What worked? And that was anything from, we started creating these playbooks that you alluded to, where we said, all right, we're going to teach the staff a process for a new customer that's interested in membership. And it looks the same every time. And we had some people that were great sellers and some people that were really new to it. And we said, all right, it's better if everybody does the same thing so we can see how it's working, than it is to have like rogue salespeople that just happen to be crushing it. And so we did that. We took some feedback and we started to develop something that worked pretty well, that everybody could kind of swallow. And, that opened up some doors, because then we could say, hey, also, there's a referral bonus if you have another friend that wants to come by or bring a guest. So some of that was effective, but, in general, the marketing world is scary. And I think I was very heavily leaning into AI in studio, and also in my mind of, how can I do this better? How can I do this more efficiently? Everything in our business is about efficiency, because whether we're cleaning a room really quickly so the next person can come in and we don't waste a lot of capacity, or whether it's kind of one of our estheticians using ChatGPT to basically word vomit everything that they can remember about an appointment and a customer, and then have a perfect paragraph to put into that customer's notes. Like, those little efficiencies matter. And it makes us look good when we have that rich data for our customers that probably, under any other circumstance would have taken a really long time to be that meticulous. But for us, it's like, if you can't get everything you know about that customer out in a minute and then put a paragraph, copy and paste it, you're not doing your job. Like, you're doing something wrong. So, I think it's kind of the marketing journey to a degree. And we just kept digging into what can work better. And we've got some really good ideas now. So
awesome. That makes a ton of sense. It sounds like it's been a journey. How did you find the right staff who you felt like could represent your business well in that sales process, in those client-facing workflows and scripts and things like that? Like, what were the sort of, ingredients that you were evaluating for?
I think the biggest one for me was, I wanted a job description that captured the brand voice and the personalities of my wife and myself, so that people knew what they were getting into. And I thought it would attract the right people if it was written in a way that was pretty authentic and not so job description-y, but more like, if you like a kick-ass time and the ability to make a lot of money and people that will teach you how to be an absolute killer in the sales world, that's what we're looking for. If you can remember 50 people's names and always greet people with a smile on your face and make them feel like a celebrity when they walk through the door, that's what we're looking for. And so you get people that start reading this description and they see themselves in it and they get excited and they're like, I didn't even know what the job is, but that's me. I want to do it. So I think the initial quality of applicants was reasonably good because of that. And then you just kind of talk with them on the phone. Like, it's a very gut feel, 10-minute, 15-minute conversation. And you're kind of judging everything by, or judging everything from how they respond to a text message when you're saying, hey, this is the owner of Zivel, saw your resume, saw some interesting things, would love to chat later. Is Wednesday a bad time? If they wait 2 days, it's probably not going to be a fit. If they respond with some weird gibberish or something that sets you funky, I would always try to do some level of search on who they were just to see what came up. And, had a lady come up where you type in her name into Google and the city that we're in, and it has like a court record of the assault and battery charge. And I'm like, just don't think it's a fit, So it's things like that. But I honestly think, the quicker, the better to kind of talk with them for 10 minutes, say, come by the studio, let's meet. Take a 5-minute tour, take a 5-minute, here's who I am, tell me about you. Why do you want to do this? What's your background like? You like selling? You like recovery? You're into health and fitness? What is it? Why do you want to do this? And just let people show you who they are. And then, you hit them with some hard questions and just see how they react. And I think the last stage for me would be, I'd give them some information about what we do. And I'd say, check this out. I'm gonna give you like 10 minutes and then just tell me about it. Tell me about the business and see how they do. And so I liked hiring younger people in kind of the early to mid 20s because they were a little bit hungrier. They were a little bit, they had more stamina, for lack of a better term, to kind of hustle around the studio for an 8-hour shift. They complained less. They didn't have so many excuses and they were ready to learn. We have an environment where it can be really fun. It could be fun to learn what we do. It could be fun to learn how to sell and how to close, $3,000 package and have somebody give you a credit card and you charge that money. So, there's a lot of appealing things in terms of developing and trying to pour into your employees. And I think last but not least, I kind of took everything that the good leaders that I had showed me and the terrible leaders that I'd had. And I said, all right, let's just try not to do all that bad stuff. And that was anything from, getting the speed wobbles on paying somebody a lot of commission when they do really well, to the way that you protect your employees from the stresses of the business that you're feeling. And remembering that it's not their problem. So don't expect it to be their problem and for them to act like revenue for the month of March is their problem. And that's part of the job, right? My wife tells me, you should treat your employees as good or better than you treat your clients. And if I think about that and I had that mindset, it's a really important thing. And I would say, along the way, another piece of advice I got was, eventually the business is going to be so repetitive and easy, and you'll know it's so inside and out, it'll be pretty boring. And the only thing that's going to keep you engaged is the relationships with maybe your clients, but really your employees and that culture and coming to work, seeing them every day for 5 years versus seeing a member for 6 months and then they leave and you're like, okay. But there's not that much changing with sauna, right? Like I can describe it pretty completely, and I don't need to go to school and do a training course on the latest and greatest sauna things. So that's something that I think about is I want to have people around that I that like me, that I have been patient with and developed and helped and cared about. And, it's everything from we try to take 10 or 15 minutes every week. And I just pull one of the staff into the conference room and say, tell me about your life. What's been going on? Just shut it off out there. Everybody else can handle it. What's going on with you? Just to hear. Right. And it's funny because I do that with clients every day. Part of what we do is we just let them vent about their emotions, their injuries, the stuff that nobody else will give them the time of day to listen to. And it's a pretty nice release for them. But I think a lot of times you're just thinking about how do I make the business the best? And if you make your staff really happy and love to work there, that's one of the best things you can do for the business is kind of what we found.
Yeah. And how do you think about the insulating your staff members who it sounds like are really kind of sales forward? They're really like thinking very long and hard in every interaction about how do I create value in this interaction. I've often seen in businesses that have that type of an approach that there's so much, like, when you're selling something, you get rejected all the time. You send someone a message and they put in all caps, stop, or you call somebody and they say, why are you calling me? There's just like all this negativity in a lot of the interactions. And I find that oftentimes kind of younger staff members or people who are doing sales for the first time or just maybe the second time, they can get really demoralized by that, or they can really like take it personally or get really upset. And that affects how they perform in their job, how they feel about working. For you, is that something that's come up, as you've kind of like built this team of effectively like elite, provider, seller, hybrid, people who represent you?
I think absolutely. So there's a couple of ways I'll kind of answer the question. And the first one is saying it's your job to protect them. And when I say that, it could be not letting your stress leak out onto them and put you in a bad mood. But more importantly, it's if I have a customer that's just off the rails, that's not a customer that I want a staff to have to handle, like a staff member. So I had a lady call the other day, just like, I want to cancel. I want my money back. And obviously we have a cancellation policy and everything like that. And I just immediately kind of sensed, hey, my staff member is freezing up here and she's potentially about to get yelled at. And I was like, let me take that call. And the call goes like, this lady's intoxicated and she is very emotional. And she's saying things like, listen, this didn't do anything for me. I'm not saying that you guys are a bunch of liars, but, I just felt like ripped off, and goes on and on and on. And then my response is just take it on the chin. I'm so sorry. That sounds so hard. I understand you're in pain. That must be really hard. And by the end of it, it kind of comes out. She's like, if you guys ever took insurance, then I'd be back there every day doing this stuff. And she's like, I'm just in pain. This neuropathy is really bothering me. And I'm not saying I'd ever hurt myself, and I'm like, whew, okay, this is not a staff problem. This is a personal problem that needs an owner level, emotionally stable person to just diffuse. And, for me, it's being able to say, hey, I'll refund it. This is not worth $129 to have you feel upset. To turn those situations into wins. But I'll give another one that was a little bit more, kind of closer to the home in terms of the studio. And that is, I got a staff member. I take this guy back. He does one of the services. He's at the front getting checked out and starts hitting on my 20-year-old front desk girl, asking her age, asking her and this guy is a monstrously large guy. Like a huge guy. And I'm not a small guy, but this guy's way bigger than me. And I'm like, I don't know this is happening until he leaves. And my employee says, hey, didn't really know what to do, but I want to just tell you, like, that guy was kind of making me uncomfortable. And I was like, tell me everything exactly as it happened. And I said, okay, come in the conference room with me. And I put this phone on speaker and I called this guy and I said, hey, you were just in the studio. This is Kelly, the owner. Did you approach one of my employees and start hitting on her and asking her age and asking her what she's up to and that she's got a beautiful smile? And I said, what is the matter with you? Like, that's one of my employees. She's got a boyfriend. You have a wife. You're 20 years old. Like, where do you get off coming in to anywhere and talking to a female like that? And I said, don't ever come back to the studio. And he recoiled. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I was out of line and this is boys being boys. And I was like, that's crap. I was like, you should know better. You should be better. Don't ever do that. And don't ever come back to my studio. And, you've got this 20-year-old girl who's probably never had somebody stand up for her, with a monstrous human being that's like in her face, making her feel uncomfortable. And then here's this owner that she's worked for 2 months that's got her back. And, things like that can go a long way to having somebody feel like you're a good boss. And I think the last one would be, never stop telling your staff how great they are when they're doing great things. And never stop paying them when they're doing the behavior that you want to occur in the studio. And, you gotta kind of do those things. The other story that I'll give you was, there was a call in that was like, hey, I heard you guys had a day pass. I wanted to come in and check it out. She's like, yeah, we do. That's, we have some availability this afternoon. What would you like to do? And the lady said, I'm going to call you back and I'll get everything scheduled. Okay, great. We'll be here. We usually take a $29 deposit to get you in there. Okay. 2 hours later, no call back. This person walks in and says, hey, I called about the day pass. And she's like, oh yeah, I didn't hear what you wanted to do. The girl goes, well, my mom and my sister are here, so we're ready to do our services. We want to each do 3 things. And my employee's like, oh, okay, we'll try to put you into these things. Let me see what we have available. And there's another member sitting there, and she overhears the girl say to her mom, I didn't actually sign us up for anything. I thought, we'd kind of come and see what we want to do. Right. But I don't necessarily know what we're doing. And then my GM comes back to the front and she's like, yeah, so we'll have to have you wait a little bit. Normally we schedule these out. And this girl just loses it. And she's like, I can't believe this. I called 2 hours ago. I brought my mom and my sister. We were supposed to be booked. We had appointments and everything. Like, we told you exactly what we wanted to do, like making a scene. And I got a call from my GM and she goes, I need help. And my GM does not call and say, I need help. And I was like, I'll be there in 5 minutes. So I put my kids in the car, took them into the back of the studio, said, hey, sit here by the laundry bin while I handle this, and went up and kind of, again, diffused the situation, gave him a gift certificate, got him into a couple things, apologized profusely, and, kind of turned it around and had my GM removed from the situation. That said, you don't have to deal with them at all for the rest of the time they're here. I'm going to take all that. And, she literally went out to her car for the shift and was like crying and thinking like, how should I have handled that better? And then you just got to reassure them and you're like, that was uncalled for. There was no answer there. And you got to just, take that off of them. Little fun stories like that where, a lot of people want to talk with the owner and want to vent. And if you can sort of, at the same time, sort of defend your team as you are diffusing a situation and breeding bad blood and bad reviews, and recognizing that, hey, if the worst thing I have to do today is give $99 back to a psychopath who'll never come back here, I'll do it.
Tell us a little bit about where the business is today, what some of your goals are, and what you'd want to do in the long run. So, where the business is today, what your goals are, what would be great in the long run.
All right. So the business is at a place where it has an overhead of around $35,000. And that includes what we typically pay in commissions, what we pay in royalties to the franchisor, all of the other overhead, rent, utilities, etc. So when we look at a month, we're looking to do no less than 35K. Otherwise, money comes out of my pocket and it's super scary. And that's when Kelly, the owner, is like a little stressed walking around the studio when the numbers are at 28 and it's getting close to the end of the month. I'm like, oh shit. So where we are going is far, far north of 35K. And in our best months so far, we've been at the $48,000 in a month. This month, we are slated to kind of break 50K for the first time, which is a huge milestone for us.
Huge.
And what I'll tell local business, what I'll say about that is, as scary as it is to get to your break-even point, is as exciting as it is to get past your break-even point, because the amount of profit that you get to keep in a month when you blow your overhead away by 15, 20K is like 15K, right? So it can be more than you were making at a, $130,000, $150,000, $180,000 job. So that's exciting. And you want to really push to get to the end of the month and, kind of close those numbers as best you can. The other thing I'll say is you will have the ups and downs, even when you're just locked in and you're doing everything right, you're doing everything better than you were doing it. You'll have a shit month and you'll be like, God, like, why is this so hard? Like, I can't, and so half our business is membership revenue, and probably the other half are what we call premium services that are a little more expensive, but the membership revenue is obviously more recurring. And what I would say is the future of the business looks like bumping up our memberships from about 100 to about 150 members, and that will result in about 30K in revenue. So we'll almost cover our overhead with just memberships. And then everything else we make on top of that is really profit, bonuses, extra monies for charity, things like that. And that is an exciting picture to see. And we're not that far away from it, right? Like getting 40 or 50 new members is not a mountainous task that'll take 5 years to do, right? You should do it in 3 to 5 months. But as far as the business potential, I think we can be a $750,000 a year business if we get the membership revenue up, and then we do the right things to sustain both the membership side and the premium services side. And one quick thing that I'll mention on how we're going to do that is when I look at our membership base, there's members that have kind of just joined that are, a little bit spotty. And then there's like perfect members that were built to come to our studio that will never quit. And I think to myself, every time we lose a member, a new member might come along and replace them that's like a lifer. And so over time, we start to build a membership base full of our ideal members, not just for them, but we make them and they love being there. And so that takes a little bit of time to change your membership, the membership makeup to a very large percentage of your ideal type of members. And one of the ways that we're going to do that is by tightening up our marketing efforts. And so what we do now is a very generic Facebook form. Our goal is to get you to react, to get you to say, well, what is that? That looks kind of cool. I'm going to try that. And the challenge there is that we get all kinds of people that are texting, filling out a form that we have to call back and remind them that they filled out a form because they're like, what is this? Oh yeah, this is 1 a.m. last night. I was just scrolling on Instagram. Okay. So that's tough. That takes a little bit of sales finesse to cold call somebody at 8:30 in the morning and be like, let's end this with you giving me $29 in appointment deposit and coming in Thursday for a $199 service, right? That gap is huge. Not everybody's going to be able to make that happen. And I make that happen because I'm the owner and I have to, and I've been doing it for 20 years. But, my 20, 22, 23, 24-year-old newbies, they don't have a chance. I could train them all day and it'd be really hard. And they would get all the no's and all the don't call me and who is this? No, just stop. Like, I don't want you, just stop calling me. They'd get that over and over and over. And I get it. I'm like, perfect. Next. But they would be like, God, it's another smack in the face. So all that to say, there's a better way that we're exploring where the feedback that we provide to, let's say, the meta creatives and the algorithm is such that when we have a client that is looking for a more high-end experience, is not looking for a deal per se, is not looking to just have their clickbait, quota reached, then we'll get better leads and we'll get those ideal type members. And so what that actually looks like is right now, you might see a really flashy ad with a bunch of videos and clips in a special, and you might click on it, and then you might come in, but you might really not have a lot of intent to come in. But Facebook looks at that and says, that's perfect because they filled out the form. That's all I know, and that's all I care about. I'm going to keep finding that kind of person. And that pool is huge. So we never get any specificity into what our actual ideal customer looks like. And so the change in that model is going to be a higher end approach where the ad looks more like, here's who we are, here's what we're about, here's why we exist. And if you are interested, check out our website. And then when they go to that website, we have data on what they're doing, on what they're looking at, on where they're spending their time, on if they're clicking for more information or if they're clicking on a book now. And then we can feed that back into Facebook using a really sophisticated AI platform. And now Facebook knows exactly the kind of people that we're looking for that will make those ideal members. And they come in as really warm leads, and they're easy to talk to. They want to be there. They want to make that appointment deposit. And they're asking you, how do I get in today? Rather than, what do you do? Who is this? Yeah, I'm at work. And so I think that transition from the type of marketing that everybody does, just like clickbait, hammer you with Facebook ads, it's like, it's broad, it can be effective, but it's not at all optimized. And we want to have our marketing align with our brand. And that means we're not trying to sort of, go fishing for people that are looking for something quick and cheap. We want people that are like, this place is beautiful. This is what would really impact my life. I've been looking for this. I'm excited about doing it. I'm going to call them and see how I can make this happen. And I'm ready to go. So that'll help me. That'll help my staff. It'll lighten the load on all the outbound calls that we have to do. And more importantly, it'll allow us to further leverage AI to respond quickly to them and to have a infrastructure where as soon as they are showing interest, we reach out. We reach out with a very personalized, knowledgeable, which we answer all their questions. We get back to them quickly, and we get back to them every time, and nothing falls through the cracks. So that's, I think, one of the most exciting things about the future of our business is simply the people that we're appealing to. And maybe going back to my very, first blunder as I didn't know who would be interested in this. I didn't know if there was a market at all. I think this will help us really find that market. So that's what we want to do.
Awesome, man. Well, Kelly, it's been great to chat. It's so inspiring, for me and for other people who are starting this journey or want to maybe start this journey, to hear from someone who's actually done it, gone through the gridiron and really sort of, made their way through the gauntlet and been able to build something real, that makes real money and has real customers and people really think is like a valuable business that, they're happy is in their community. So thanks a ton. Really appreciate it and look forward to chatting soon.
I appreciate the time, man. It was awesome. The one thing that I'll close with is along the lines of what you're saying about actually getting out and doing it. I came from, like I said, a tech sales background. I know some elite sellers and some really, really intelligent individuals that are just absolutely crushing it. And they're still not happy with the job that they are in. And when they look at me and I talk with them about what I'm doing and I tell them how happy I am to go into work, they often say the same thing. And that is, man, you really did it. We all talked about it. And you quit your W-2 job and went out and started a business that, like you said, is making money and that you enjoy working at, that is going to allow you the freedom to not be on the Monday morning pipeline call because you decided you're going to close the studio on every Monday so you can have a day off. And, to me, that is it makes you feel like you stepped up to the plate and you said, you know what? I can do this.
It's incredible.
I'm capable, I'm intelligent, I'm driven, and I'm willing to bet on myself. And it's when that bet pays off, man, it feels pretty good.
It's so cool. Yeah. Awesome, man. All right.
Yeah.
Well, take care and we'll talk soon. Okay. Thanks for listening to Made Locally. If you found this useful, share it with another business owner who's in the trenches like you. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next episode. And if something stood out, I'd love to read your comments. See you in the next episode.